Welcome to Master's Bible School Old Testament Survey. Glad you're able to join us tonight, all of you in the community and around the world. God bless you. We're going to be covering the book of Judges and wrapping it up tonight. Let's open in prayer. Lord, open our hearts, open our minds. In Jesus' name, help us to understand everything you want to teach us. Amen. Amen. So quick review. Judges. Now, for the Old Testament survey, there's really a few key things that you have to be able to do in your mind. First of all, you need to know the main theme of the book of Judges. It's across the top. The cycle of sin. That's what it's about. It's about being right, being wrong, being right, being wrong, and God putting a deliverer in each time you cried out. The key verse to describe the entire book should be memorized. So you need to know Judges, the cycle of sin, and the key verse, which sort of summarizes the Bible, or that book. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and then it goes on to say, therefore, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's what you need to know. Okay, now, the timing is in the upper left. What is the chronological order of the book of Judges? After Joshua. If you remember the book of Joshua, the timing for the book of Joshua was after Moses. Okay, and then Moses is, do you remember? 1500 BC. So it gives us some ideas. Okay, now the book of Judges is broken into three separate sections, three main parts. That's what you need to know, these three boxes. The first one is just the first two chapters, which describes the compromise that the Jews made with the Canaanites. They just kind of stopped fighting. It was too hard. They just began letting them live among them, even though they were commanded not to do that. And that God specifically warned them, if you do that, you will intermarry with them. And you won't make them better. They will make you worse. Same warning God gives to Christians today. Because inside of you is a sinful man, right? But God is leading you. Inside of them is a sinful man, and God's not leading them, so the two sinful characters want to walk together. So it's always a bad idea to be partnered up together with an ungodly person, because the temptation, it will corrupt you, not necessarily perfect them. And so the Canaanite compromise is the first slice, and that's the cycle of sin. They sin, they're oppressed, they cry out. God gives them a deliverer called a judge, not a king, not an emperor, just a man or a woman in one instance who God uses to rally everybody together and bring them back to God in a mighty victory. And then there's peace. And then after peace, sin again. That's the first slice. You have to be able to do that in your mind. You must be able to know that. The second slice, which is the main meat of the book, are the 12 judges. So the name of the first one is Canaanite Compromise, chapters 1 and 2. 12 judges, chapters 3 through 16. Specifically focusing in on the two judges, or the three judges of Deborah. Barak is not a judge, but Deborah and Barak work together in chapters 4 and 5. Gideon in chapters 6 through 8. And Samson, chapters 13 through 16. You need to kind of know where they're at and be able to repeat where they're at in the book of Judges. And you need to know their stories, which we covered in detail when we covered that slice. We are now in the last slice of the book of Judges, and it's simply called No King. In fact, the last slice of the book of Judges is just a set of examples that God placed in there, and we'll talk about that for you and I to know how bad it was. And why was it so bad? Because the people were not under God, and they were under no authority but their own. That is a bad place to be. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And you'll notice that's the key verse for the whole book of Judges. So we are in section 3, starting in chapter 17. Now, up until now, we have been looking at the external threats to Israel's existence. You got different people groups who've been infiltrating and oppressing and harming them, and we've been looking at those. But the last few chapters, there are no external threats. The last few chapters reveal the more dangerous internal threats. their morality, their spirituality. That was what was destroying them. You know, in the scriptures, it says, we do not battle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and heavenly forces in the darkness. In other words, we are actually fighting a greater battle than me and that other person. And these last few chapters show how the people had become deceived and why they were failing as a nation, because they were failing as a people morally. So the book of Judges closes with two main stories. Chapter 17 through 18. You want to go to the next slide, Jay? The one we were talking about. Chapter 17 through 18 and chapters 19 through 21. Those are the two main stories we're going to look at tonight. 17 through 18, God had placed these stories in here to give you an example specifically of how their religion had failed. Just what was wrong with their religion. We're going to see some of the most unbelievable things, knowing that just one generation earlier was Joshua and Caleb and a bunch of people following a cloud and eating from manna and watching the river dry up, the Jordan, so they could cross over, and seeing God pull down the walls of Jericho with a shout. One generation removed. And we're going to see how their corruption of their religion had been complete. It's going to include a guy named Micah. He's an Ephraimite. Okay, he's one of the tribes of Israel. We're going to find out his character. And he decides he needs help. He needs God's blessing, so he makes God. We'll talk about that. And we're going to see the Danites' migration to the north, where Dan, the tribe of Dan, still hasn't conquered their land. And we're told the reason they didn't conquer it is because it was hard. So they're literally just a group of people that have been given a promise of God, haven't taken it. They finally said, this is terrible. So they actually relocate from Joppa on the coast. I think you actually might even have a map of that, the Danite migration, Jay. They start on the corner of the coast, down by Joppa here, and they actually move all the way up and go up to Dan in the far north to find some land that they can live in. And on the way, they decide they should get a nice, good traveling God for them. And so they pocket a God and go north. We'll talk about that. Back to the other slide. 19 through 21 will example how corrupt their morality was. Not only had their religion become utterly corrupt, their moral thinking had become utterly corrupt. We're going to find one of the most shocking stories in the whole Bible, and we cannot walk away thinking God endorsed it. He didn't endorse it. The purpose of putting it into the book of Judges was to show how bad people could be. And it gets detailed. An unnamed Levite and his concubine end up going through a terrible scene, and the sin of Gibeah. Both of these are completely wretched, but both start and both end. Look what it, both start and both end with, in those days there was no king. Both stories. That's the reason for the whole thing. In those days there was no king. So what do we find out? In those days there was no king means God is revealing what is within man. I'll tell you what's within man. Read the last part of Judges. That's what's within man. Disturbing things. You remember, after the judgment of the flood, after the whole world had been flushed by God, right? It was after that. There's Noah and there's his kids. God says in Genesis 8:21, literally after it all been cleansed, he said, the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. That was the purified people after the flood. Okay, one more thing I want to point out. These stories are not chronological. They're representational. So what's important isn't when they occurred, except we do know it occurred during the time of Judges. What's important is what they show us. So they're not chronological, but they are representational. If they were chronological, we're going to come across a guy named Phineas. If they were chronological, he would have been 350 years old at that story. So they're not chronological. They've been placed so we can grasp how bad it was. And don't think they forgot God. Oh no, God is all over in chapters 17 through 21. He's mentioned 18 times in a bad way. The mother, when she blesses her thieving son, she blesses him in the name of Yahweh. When Micah decides he really needs to make some idols to worship, he makes them for Yahweh. He believes that Yahweh is going to bless him, the name of God, because now he's hired a Levite to oversee his idols. So God's name is all over in chapter 17 through 21, exactly like it is in the United States today. People say, I'm a Christian. They say, Jesus, God bless you. Try that in the United States. If you say, God bless you, people, a lot of them will say, God bless you in return. Bless you too. But they don't know God. They don't know God. But these chapters give us a picture of the spiritual life of Israel, making clear to anyone who will read the history of Israel that they would understand their religion was false and their morality was corrupt. And they do a pretty good job. Chapter 17, verse 1. There was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. You can see the mountains of Ephraim. So show them where Shiloh is, Jay. Here's Shiloh. What's happening in Shiloh? Do you know? You know what's happening in Shiloh at this time of Judges? It's where the tabernacle is. It's where the ark is. It's where the priests are. It's where the sacrifices are, all in Shiloh. Now show them, Jay, how far it is to the mountains of Ephraim. See this mountain range right here? We're talking within 10 miles of Shiloh, this story takes place. Within 10 miles of godliness, righteousness, correct religion, this whole story takes place. His name was Micah. He makes a confession to his mom. He says, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, well, and you cursed the person who took it, and you said in my ears, well, I want to let you know I took it. So Micah starts out with a confession. It's still 1,100 shekels. How much is 1,100 shekels? Later on in the story, Micah will pay his priest 10 shekels a year. In other words, it's about the equivalent of an entire lifetime's wages. You're like, yeah, I took it, sorry. His mother responds, oh, may you be blessed by Yahweh, my son. Bless you, you little stinking thief. Think about that. Where's she thinking? Oh, you got me, right? So when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mom, his mother said, I dedicated the silver to the Lord for my son to make a carved image and a molded image. Now, therefore, I will return it to you. In other words, I'm using this for false gods. I'm going to make a god. I'm going to make Yahweh God. So he returned the silver. His mother took 200 shekels, took it to a silversmith, made a carved image and a molded image, and they were given to Micah, to the house of Micah. And then Micah had a shrine, again, 10 miles away from Shiloh. He sets up a shrine. Every god needs a shrine. Sets up a shrine, made an ephod. What's an ephod? It's an apron with some jewels and stuff in it that was used for the Levites. It was their holy clothing at the tabernacle. You can dress like you're a priest at the tabernacle, but it doesn't make you a priest at the tabernacle. That doesn't matter. I got some gods, got some silver, I got a shrine, right? And household idols. And he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. It's not even a Levite. Like, someone's got to take care of my God. Who will dust him? Therefore, he sets up one of his sons to be the priest. Kind of a strange scene, huh? He gets his own special idols for God. In Deuteronomy 27, when they entered the land, again, one generation earlier. Well, at least, maybe not one generation. Actually, I don't know the timing of the story. So recently in their history, in Deuteronomy 27, the Levites stood on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim and shouted blessings and cursings back and forth to the people of Israel. And they even wrote them down on the mountain. This is what they said in Deuteronomy 27:14. Cursed is the one who makes a carved or molded image. Wait a second. Let's see. And he made it into a carved and molded image. Verse 4. Hello? You see anything wrong with this? It's exactly what they said, don't do. Cursed is the one who makes a carved or molded image, an abomination to the Lord, the work of the hands of the craftsman. As it says, he get it to the silversmith, he carved it, was a craft, and sets it up in secret. And he sets it up in secret as a shrine. And all the people shall say and answer, Amen. That seems pretty specific. He might just say, and if your name is Micah, you could actually put that in Deuteronomy 27, 14, and 15. And if your name is Micah, it's even worse. Only a Levite was supposed to serve God in the temple. This wasn't the temple or the tabernacle, and it wasn't God. Again, we can learn from this. These things were written down for our admonition, Paul said to the Corinthians. So what is happening around us today? We see a lot of, Paul calls it in 2 Timothy 3:5, a form of godliness. You look like a Christian. At first glance, it's kind of a Christian language, right? But you know, just because you're religious doesn't mean you're right before God. Just because you're religious doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're saved. Who's the most religious man on the face of the earth in the last days? Take a guess. The Antichrist. The Antichrist wants everybody to be religious. Only he didn't set up shrines for little carved images. He set them up for him. And guess what? People are going to follow him. So you can get an idea how messed up their religion is. Verse 7, now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah. So you can see where Bethlehem's at. Can you put a pointer on it for us? There it is, down south. And then kind of point up towards Shiloh. That's kind of the area that he's going to go up into this area, right? He was a Levite, so he actually could have served in the tabernacle. The Levites were chosen for that. He left Bethlehem to where he could find a place. He literally was looking for a job, looking for something to do. He came to the mountains of Ephraim, and he stopped by Micah's house. Micah said to him, hey, where are you from? And he said, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm on my way to find a place to stay. And you can imagine Micah's eyes, bing. Oh, I've got gods. I've got ephods. I've got shrines. I've got a Levite in my house. So Micah said to him, hey, dwell with me. And he says, it's really funny. It's a young man. He says, and be a father and a priest to me. It's amazing. You know, I want to quote Jesus, who said, don't call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and that is in heaven. So what he's saying is, look, I'll raise you up to be my religious head, you Levite. Not only that, I'll give you 10 shekels and a shirt. Literally, 10 shekels and a suit of clothes and your sustenance. You get to eat and a shirt and 10 shekels. And the Levite was content to dwell with the men. You mean I just got to dust the idols and that's it? Say, God bless you at the meal and it's all good? And the young man became like one of his sons. So Micah consecrated the Levite and the young man became his priest. And then look at verse 13. And then Micah said, now I know Yahweh will be good to me. Oh yeah, God is smiling on me. He even brought me a Levite. No, he wasn't smiling. In fact, you know what the Levite just did? I don't know if he considered it, but the Levite literally just stepped into a place where he will be judged more strictly than everybody else. It says that in James 3:1. Let not many of you become teachers. Now, if you're a teacher, think about this. Let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a greater or stricter judgment. Think about that. He had known what was right and was teaching wrong. In Deuteronomy 24, verse 8, it literally says the Levites are to teach Israel. The Levites. He was supposed to be a teacher. But he needed a job. And so he didn't want to turn down a job. He is serving for 10 shekels and a shirt. How many men are in ministry today serving for 10 shekels and a shirt? They've been doing it since the beginning because people are willing to pay a priest. They're willing because they want to in their heart. This is why Peter expressly forbids it. 1 Peter 5:2, talking to the elders, the bishops, the teachers, the pastors. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly. Don't take a job pastoring a church, ever. You don't take a job pastoring a church. You serve a church as a pastor. It's not a job. In fact, Paul also tells Titus in chapter 1, verse 7, Titus 1:7, that you must be blameless, you must be a steward of God, and you must not be greedy for money. So I just did a quick internet search. What kind of jobs with my credentials, 20 plus years of teaching the Bible and leading a church, and successful church plants, and got a couple of cool videos. What kind of money could I make? I literally went online and did some pastoral job searches. I want to read to you the deep spiritual needs that are out there. Are you ready? Quote, work with Next Gen Pastor to develop the big picture of ministry for families and community, $58,000 a year. Would you like that, Jason? Would you like that? That'd be a nice income, $58,000 a year. Well, I got to work with a next-gen pastor. That's nothing. Here's another one. Work closely with the lead pastor and the executive pastor to establish and execute the church's brand. Huh? I don't even know what that means. It's their thing, man. It's their hookah, right? Whatever. I don't even know what brand is. But you make $90,000 a year publishing the brand. Wow. I'm telling you, after this video, I'm quitting, gonna go get a career. What am I doing here? Here's one. As a worship leader, that's code for plays guitar. As a worship leader, you'll get to advance the gospel by leading and building a culture of worship at one of our campuses. We don't even know which one. It'll be like over here on this block or that one, and we don't know. But man, think about how you're going to build $51,000 a year. Whoa. Can I just quote Paul? He seems to be appropriate at this moment. Let me tell you about Paul's brand strategy, right? Paul said this, if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for necessity is laid upon me. Notice he didn't say, I wanted some money. Necessity was laid upon me. Yes, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. What if they don't pay me? Gotta do it anyways. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. What is my reward? Okay, yeah, see, Paul, you got a lot of money. What is my reward? Here it is. You ready for the reward? Especially for those pastors who are job hunting right now. That when I preach the gospel, I may present the gospel of Christ without charge. That's his reward, he said. That I may not abuse my authority in the gospel. His reward was, you know what? I didn't even cost anything. I'm free. The Levite wanted a career, not realizing he actually was falling to greed. So Micah buys a priest for his shrine. Sure, God's going to bless him. Shiloh's only 10 miles away. Enter the next story, the Danites. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Yeah, no doubt. And not many priests, probably. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For until that day, their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So they literally, see, it says Dan down here, they're just kind of hanging out near the Judah area, and they're like, man, it's like I got to live in a mobile home my whole life. I'd sure like to build a house. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a house and maybe had a farm or something? And so they're finally sick of it. But do you remember why they didn't have land? The scriptures, Judges tells us, in Judges 1:34, I'll just read it to you instead of quoting it. Let me read it to you. This is why they don't have land. Judges 1:34. In case you're confused, the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains, for they just would not allow them to come down to the valley, because the Amorites were determined to dwell there. Well, that's good enough. That's why I didn't obey God. It was just a hard thing. I'm like, those valley people, they're not much fun. I'm going to hang out in the bushes up in the woods, right? So they finally get sick of it. They look at each other and they go like, let's go find a place to live. So the children of Dan sent 5 men north men of valor from Zorah to spy out the land and search it out. They said, go search it out. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim. So they're making their way to the north. They're kind of cruising up to the north to where they're going to end up. And they end up at this place where Micah, obviously he's got a place, he's got a big house. He had 1,100 shekels he could steal from his mom. So he's got some cash, right? They come by, hey, hospitality, and they lodge there. Verse 3, while they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. Remember, he was from down south in Bethlehem, near to them. So he was from right here. I can't point to it. It disappears. He was from Bethlehem. They're from near Kirjath Jearim. They'd actually met each other. They's like, hey, is that Bob? Is that Bob the Levite? Right? His name wasn't Bob, by the way. For those internationally, that's sarcasm. They recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned and said, hey, who brought you here? What are you doing? What do you have here? He's like, oh, thus and so Micah did for me. Check it out. Check it out. I'm here because God called me. No, he hired me. Oh, why are you preaching? Well, they hired me. I did an interview, and the board said you're good, and you got like nice face and cool hair and like your style. You can really brand this baby, right? So he hired me, so I become his priest. And they're like, hey, perfect. Please inquire of God, should we go and be prosperous? And the priest said, he didn't even inquire of God. He's like, okay, I've got it. It's as simple. God always has good. It's always good. You're blessed, man, just because you're near me, right? So they said, please inquire of God that we may know. And he says, oh, go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way. Ha ha. And then he wrote a book called Your Best Life Now. It's really good. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there and how they dwelt. And they looked safe and quiet and secure. There was nothing they were afraid of. Spies come back and they tell everybody in verse 8, they say, hey, it's a good report. Let's go. We've seen the land. It's good. Let's go. Don't hesitate. Let's go. Verse 10. When you go, you will come to a secure people and a large land, for God's given it into your hands. How do they know? Because Micah, his name's Jonathan, by the way, the Levite, he blessed us. There's no lack. So 600 of them. So now there's not 5, now there's 600. And they're cruising up, and they went up and encamped in Kirjath Jearim, right? And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim, and they came to the house of Micah. Hey, by the way, there's this guy along the way. He helped us out last time. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, here it is, do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, an apron, a Levite apron, household idols, and they're named Yahweh, same as our God, a carved image and a molded image? Consider what you should do. Should we just pass by these gods, or should we steal them? I just wanted to think about the logic here. So they turned aside and came to the young Levite, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. Hi, how you doing? The 600 men, armed with weapons of war, stood at the entrance of the gate. So the 5 guys are like, hey, how you doing, Jonathan? Everything's really great. Don't worry about those guys. They're all like, their mouths are dripping with saliva, and they got their hair wild, and they got blood on their swords, and they're all looking at you. Don't worry about them. We're a good group of guys. Then the 5 men who'd gone up, went up, entering in, oops, I missed it. Then the 5, who had gone to spy out the land, went up, entering in, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, the molded image, they stole God, right? The priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. When they went into Micah's house and they took it, the priest goes, hey, what you doing? That's my God. And they said to him, shh, I got to read it. Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth. I want to say that to somebody at some point when they won't stop talking. Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Look, we got a job for you. Be a father and a priest to us. Here it is. You ready? Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man? 10 shekels in a shirt, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel. Ooh, A tribe. You mean I could trade my little 50-person church? I could trade it for a 500-person church in my own parking spot with says Pastor Travis right there in like yellow paint? Yes, you can. So the priest's heart was glad. This guy sound like he's serving the Lord? Oh, this is fantastic. Everywhere I go, God's blessing me. I get my own gods. I get my own house, my shrine. Get my own tribe. So he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. Okay, first of all, this is terrible. But this is the book of Judges. These are the Levites who were instructing people in the right way to live. Just like the pastors now today in the U.S. are instructing people in the right way to live, and they're really corrupt. That's the first thing. This guy, he's just interested in a greater income. That's the first thing. Here's the second thing. The idols were never his. He literally stole Micah's gods. The whole scene is a just mix of morality and immorality and religion, and I don't know. It'd be like this. Hey, man, you want to start a Bible study? You really got to know the Bible. Oh, man, I want to know the Bible. So you go out and steal 6 Bibles, different translations, so you can really study it. Wow. Okay. Folks, there's going to be corruption always in religion. Always. And in the last days, greater corruption. Okay? 2 Thessalonians 2:3. The return of Jesus Christ will not come unless the apostasy comes first, the falling away, and then the man of sin is revealed. In other words, the church will be apostate or corrupt. 1 Timothy 4:1, the Spirit expressly says, you know what that means? Count on it. Expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith and give heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. You can expect to see it. It's going to happen. That's what's going to happen before the return of Jesus. It will be bad. So what do I do? What do you do? What do you do overseas? Paul says in 1 Timothy 4:16, take heed to yourself and to the doctrine. Get your doctrine right. Teach right. Continue in them, for in doing this you will save both yourself and those who hear you. You can save those around you by continuing to teach the Bible right. You won't save the world, but you'll save those who hear you. And you're hearing me now, and they're going to hear you. You teach the Bible, and you'll see people saved. So they departed, and they put their little ones and the livestock and the goods and their little gods in the back, and they took off. When they were a good way off from the house of Micah, the men who were in the house began like, hey man, something's wrong. The gods are missing. And they called out to the children of Dan, and the Danites turned around and they're like, what's your problem? Why have you gathered? And he said, you've taken my gods. I love this. I got to read it. You've taken away my gods, which I made. Well, there's your first problem, buddy. And the priest, you took my priest. That's my shirt he's wearing. And you've gone away. What do I have? What more do I have? How can you say to me what ails you? And the children of Dan said, you know what? Do not let your voice, verse 25, be heard among us. You better put a hand over your mouth, lest angry men fall upon you and you find that you're dead, as well as your gods are gone, and you lose your life and your household loses their lives. Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong, he turned around. So they took the things Micah had made, this is big, and the priest who had belonged to him, and they went to Laish. Way up there. They went a long ways. And the name of Laish, of course, when you conquer a city, you always got to name it after you. So if I ever conquered a city, you guys could all come to Travis, Oregon. But I haven't, but someday maybe. So they changed the name to Dan. And they went up there and attacked him, and they called the name of the city, verse 29, Dan, because that was their name, right? So, however, the name of the city was formerly Laish. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image of Jonathan. So now you know the Levite's name. Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. And his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. When was the day of the captivity of the land? This is somewhere around, say, 1400 BC. They have 700 plus years, close to maybe 800 years before 722 BC happens when Assyria takes over Israel. They just kept doing it, and this established something that lasted longer than their faith in God. Think about that. They set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. They made another place to go worship. What a great contrast. Up in Dan is this thing, and down here is Shiloh. This event, though, was like a seed. It set in motion a constant and continuous false religion in the city of Dan. So much so that in Amos 8:14, God refers to the city of Dan as the sin of Samaria. The city is the sin of Samaria. And remember when Solomon died and Rehoboam rose up and he wasn't a very good king, and Jeroboam ripped half of the kingdom of Israel apart, took it. Remember, he decided, I got to set up some sort of gods. How am I going to keep people from going to the temple in Jerusalem to worship? Here's what it says, 1 Kings 12:28. The king made 2 calves of gold and said to the people, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel. And he set up one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And today, actually, if you want, can you flash forward to the actual base in Dan, the base of right here. Okay, this metal right here that you're looking at, that's the actual, you can pause, that's anywhere there is fine. That's the actual size of the altar for worshiping in Dan, worshiping the idol, the golden calf. This base all the way around it, can you just kind of circle around and show them what dates to Jeroboam? All the way around there. All the way, that's all found. That came from the time of Jeroboam. Dan was the center for idolatry from the moment Jonathan showed up with Micah's gods, and they never swayed from it. Which may answer a couple questions. You can just leave that right there, Jay. Some believe that that's the reason why the tribe of Dan is missing, never mentioned, not once in the book of Revelation. All the other tribes mentioned, every one of them's mentioned. And in Revelation 7, there's a list of the tribes, and Dan's missing. Dan's completely missing. And there's a lot of conjecture. Why is Dan not in the book of Revelation? What's with that? It might also answer this question. When Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, is dying, he blesses all 12 of his sons, puts his hand on Dan and says these words, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backward. Wouldn't that be a great blessing? Wouldn't you like to receive that, Eric? That'd be just like the blessed. Oh, thank you, Pops. I feel, I'm so blessed. The question is, why did Jacob say it? And the answer might be exactly what you just read. Idolatry rooted itself in Dan. Same as today. Idolatry is rooting itself inside of the Christian church. A lot of people doing something very similar to what Jonathan did. Just sort of bring it in the world, and it's okay if I don't do it quite the way God said. Saying, well, as long as I'm sincere, that's all that God wants. No! Jesus said this in John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. There ain't a single soul that meets God except through me. There's only one way. Jesus said there's a gate. Literally, Jesus said in John 10:9, I'm the door. It's me. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. There is no other way to heaven. There's no prophet in Mormonism. There's no Watchtower magazine. None of that. Jesus saves. Only Jesus saves. And in fact, it gets even more. In John 3:36, Jesus actually says, he who believes in the Son has everlasting life. But then the next step, but he who does not listen to his words and obey him shall not see life. You can have all the religion you want, call yourself a Christian, but John 3:36 says if you do not submit to what Jesus said, you're not saved, but the wrath of God abides on you. So we can learn a lot. If you want to study false teachers, and some of you may be doing that, read these 2 chapters. you will see the same exact behaviors. Money, power, greed, prestige, and a mix of immorality and religion. It's a perfect picture of the corruption of the church as well. Now, second set, we're going on to Judges 19. A terrible, terrible story. It came to pass in those days there was no king. There was a certain Levite staying in a remote mountain of Ephraim. So, same location, basically. Also a Levite. Maybe he was looking for a job. Don't know. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem. So he went down to where the Levites were, took a concubine. What's a concubine? A concubine is a paid-for woman who is almost a wife, but not quite. You see him throughout the New Testament or the Old Testament. A legal domestic partner that you can set aside. She's not really your wife, and her kids aren't necessarily your kids as far as inheritance. You can always marry someone else. It's terrible. It's never approved by God, and you never see a good one in the Old Testament. So the concubine played the harlot against him. What do you expect? He hired his wife, and she's like, well, you know what? He'll hire me too. So literally, she becomes a prostitute and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem and was there 4 months. She's there like, I'm done with that guy. I don't like him. Her husband rises, goes, and begs her to come back in verse 3. Come on back, come on back. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, kept him. So he tries to woo her back. She says, okay, I'll go. So he kept him 3 days. I don't know, maybe dad was checking him out. Why is my daughter running from you? He's checking him out. Came to pass on the 4th day, they arose, got ready to depart. And he said, no, stay, eat some bread, stay a little longer. Sat down together, and he stayed. When the man stood to depart in verse 7, his father-in-law urged him to lodge there, so he stayed again. So he kept staying for like 5 days now. Rose early on the 5th day to depart. He said, hey, please let me refresh you. He keeps him all day long. I'm not sure what is going on with dad here, but he keeps him all day long. However, the man was not willing to spend the night, so it's dark. It's getting dark. Bad timing. By the way, remember Book of Proverbs? There's bad locations and there's bad timing. Avoid them. Bad idea to get up with your harlot wife, harlot concubine, and begin wandering through the mountains at a time when Micah is one of the leading godly men, right? And he saddled the donkeys, and they went near Jebus. Now remember Jerusalem. That's the name of Jerusalem, Jebus. So he's making his way up north, but remember, they never conquered Jerusalem. Jerusalem's not conquered until David comes along. So there's Jebusites living in Jerusalem, looking down on them. And so they need to spend the night somewhere. She says, the servants of the man says, hey, let's go stay with the Jebusites. He's like, oh, no, not them. Not the Jebusites. They're foreigners. Let's go near and spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah. So we got 2 locations that are near each other, you can see there. And they passed by and went their way, and the sun went down, and it's dark. They went into Gibeah, and when he went in, he sat down in the open square. There's no hotel. He decided, okay, we'll just kind of hunker down. We'll stay in the city square. An old man comes in who lives in Gibeah, and he's like, man, don't stay in the open square. Doesn't it sound like Sodom and Gomorrah? Like a repeat? It is a repeat, exactly. He raised his eyes, saw the traveler, and he said, what are you doing? Where are you coming from? He tells him, I'm from Bethlehem. I'm headed north, right? Going to the house of the Lord, but there's no one who will take me into his house. We have straw, we have fodder, our servants are fed. We just need a house. And the man said in verse 20, don't stay out here. Do not spend the night in the square. So he brought him into his house and fed his animals. Here we go. Okay, now what you are about to read is terrible. Verse 22. As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly, certain men of the city, perverted men. Anybody who wants to do this, according to God, is perverted. Perverted is actually a word and can be attributed to the actions of men. Perverted men surrounded the house and beat on the door. And they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring out the man who came to your house that we may know him carnally. They want to rape the man. A group of men want to rape the guest. Why is this story in here? This is like disgusting. You know why this story is in here? So when you turn on the news tomorrow and you see things you cannot believe are occurring around you, you will believe, along with Solomon, that there is nothing new under the sun. Don't think it's somehow worse than it was in the past. This is how bad it was. Evil and immorality have been around a long time. Just read Romans chapter 1. There's a whole list of things that people begin doing, and most of them center around sexual immorality. The story we're about to read was written down for you and I to be shocked. We're supposed to be shocked and dismayed and to realize this is what society offers you without restraints. These things, 1 Corinthians 10, became our examples so that we would not lust after evil things like they lusted. Here we go. The man, how do you respond? Well, by the way, we covered it a few weeks back. If you're in the Mideast and you bring someone into your house, even if they're your enemy, you have to sacrifice your own life and family to protect them. That's the code of hospitality. So he's stuck. Can't do that. So I'm not going to say much about this. I'll just read it. Look, don't do this. It's so wicked. He's coming to my house. Look, here is my virgin daughter. And here's the man's concubine. Let me bring them out to you. Humble them. Rape them. And do with them as you please. But just don't do such a vile thing to this man. Does that seem a little off to you? Oh my goodness. But the men would not heed. So the man took his concubine. He shoves his concubine, his almost wife, shoves her out the door, locks the door. And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. They raped her all night. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was till it was light. She's laying at the door outside. When the master arose in the morning, he opened the door, went out to go his way, and there was his concubine laying on the threshold, right? And he said to her, get up. Come on, we got to go. It's enough of this sleeping in. But there was no answer. She was dead. She was raped to death. And so the man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. Now, he's mad. He's mad. I don't even understand it, the insanity of this culture. He entered the house, he took a knife, he laid hold of his concubine, and he cut her up into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. He postmarked her to all 12 tribes. Here's an arm. Here's a foot. And they got these packages. And it worked. And so it was that all who saw it said, I can't believe this. No such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up. What are we going to do? Now, I don't want you to read this story and think in any way God has endorsed what this man has done. Any of it. There's nothing in here I think God has endorsed. The whole purpose is to teach us how bad it is, and how bad it's going to be, and how bad it was. In fact, this is so wicked that 650 years later, in the book of Hosea, chapter 9, verse 9, it's called this. It's called the deeply corrupted sin, as in the days of Gibeah. That's how God refers to this. O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah, the battle in Gibeah against the children of sin. So this whole thing, God calls sin and iniquity. Well, how did they arrive at this? In those days, there was no king. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Like, it's right for me to do this, and it's wrong for me to do this, and you know what? My opinion is all that matters. They kept their own standards. This is what happens when you no longer have God's standard. Look around. Without God's standard, if it's just up to each individual, there is no truth. There is no right and wrong. Even the cutting up of the woman, I mean, what was that except selfish rage? You think he was sad? He told her to get up. Enough of this laying around. He didn't love her. There was no loving sorrow. Somebody had damaged his property, and he was mad about it. And so he cuts her up for the shock factor. Look, let's do something. This is even too bad for us. And it worked. So the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. So, I mean, I just thinking about, how about the packaging of this woman and the sending of her 12 parts? There's no refrigeration, folks. This is a nasty, wicked, disgusting nightmare story. That's what this is. The leaders of all the people gathered around. The children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. You got Mizpah on there? Yeah, so they'd gone up to Mizpah. I mean, lots of people showed up here. And they said, how did this wicked deed happen? And Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, well, my concubine, and I raped her, and then I killed her, and I cut her up and sent him out. So I took her hold of it, and I sent it to you. Look, give your advice, and what are we going to do? Verse 8. So all the people arose and said, none of us is going back to our tent or turning back to our house until this thing which we will do to Gibeah, we're going to go up against it. And there's probably too many of us. So let's just go up by lot. Let's just tens of thousands of us instead of like hundreds of thousands. We will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, a small group, and we will come to Gibeah and Benjamin and repay all the vileness they have done in Israel. So they at least say that was bad. Everything else not so bad, but that was really bad. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united together as one man. Then the tribes of Israel sent men throughout all the tribe of Benjamin. So this area in Gibeah is Benjamin. So it's the tribe of Benjamin, the people of Gibeah. They're like, hey, you got a really bad city. In fact, by the way, this is exactly what you were supposed to do in the book of Deuteronomy. If there was a great sin against a city with idolatry, they're all idol worshipers, but if there was idolatry, you were supposed to investigate, and if need be, everybody was supposed to go demolish that city. It says that in Deuteronomy, but that wasn't for this. This is for a crime. They asked the Benjamites, what's happened? Deliver up the men, the perverted men. Anybody who would do what they did is perverted. They're in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove this evil from Israel. But Benjamin's like, hey, that's flesh and blood, buddy. You don't tell me what's right and what's wrong. Wow. There's an entire tribe that isn't even shocked by the event and says, you know what? We'll decide what's right and wrong. We say it's not wrong. Wow. So the children of Israel, Benjamin, gathered together from their cities to Gibeah. They literally send all their people. They're going to defend these wicked, wicked people to go to battle against the children of Israel. Verse 15. And from their cities, at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered 26,000 men who drew the sword. Among all these people were 700 select men who were left-handed, which means they were just ultimate fighters, if you will. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. They could literally sling a stone and hit a hair. Okay? They're good. Now, besides Benjamin, the men of Israel numbered 400,000 men. Seems easy, right? It's really interesting. Watch what God allows. God allows them to kill each other. And I think that was his plan, to go ahead and just wipe out a bunch of them on both sides. Neither side is right or wrong or good. They're all bad. Then the children of Israel rose up to the house of God and to inquire of God. So they go to Shiloh, which should have been nearby. Do we know where Shiloh is in reference to Gibeah? Okay, so they go to Shiloh and they ask God at the house of God, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? And the Lord said, send Judah. He answers. Now Judah's going to get whooped. So I don't know what Judah has been doing, but I do know that every story we just talked about started down in Judah and ended up north, right, in these last days. So Judah's a mess. So God says, you know what? Judah should go up first. That's a good idea. Send Judah. And so they rose up and they encamped against Gibeah. And they went out and they got ready to fight, and the children of Benjamin came out, 22,000. They cut down to the ground. They killed 22,000 Judahites. And I'm sure it was for good reason. And the people, that is the men of Israel, encouraged themselves, and they formed battle line again, and they went up to the Lord, and they wept. What have we done? And they said, should I do it again? Shall I go again against the children of Israel? And God responds, yeah, go do it again. And so they go back up to fight, right? The second day, and Benjamin went out a second day, and they cut down 18,000 more Israelites. And I am absolutely sure for good reason. And all the children of Israel, this time they went up and they went before the house of God, and they're like, can we get another answer? So they sat there before the Lord and fasted and offered burnt offerings. And they inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, stood before it in those days. And they said, hey, shall I go up again? And then he goes, okay, yeah, go up. But this time you need to wipe them out. And then Israel set men in ambush all around Gibeah. And they went up and attacked. The children of Benjamin went out. It was a trap, basically. They came out, they turned around, and started running like, oh, we're getting killed. And then everybody enclosed upon them and destroyed all of the Benjamites. The children of Benjamin saw they were defeated. The men waited in ambush. They quickly rushed upon Gibeah. And they struck the city with the edge of the sword. All right. I'm going to skip ahead. So all of the Benjamin that day, who fell of Benjamin, verse 46, were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor. 600 Benjamites survive. God just wipes them out. And I just want to say hallelujah. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. Wow, that's good. Wipe them all out. They're really, really, really bad. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. You got Rimmon on there? So they run away, and they're gone. 600 people, they're hiding in a hole, right? And they stayed at the rock for 4 months. That's a long time. And the men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin, struck down them with the edge of the sword from every city, men and beasts. They just basically slaughtered all the Benjamites as they went home, everywhere they went. You get an idea that Israel's not doing real well? You get an idea it's utterly corrupt? That's the point of these stories. Now the men of Israel had sworn an oath. Oh, this is like so ironic. They cut up their concubines. They kill all their people. They want to rape men. Hey, but at least they keep their promises. Literally. We swore an oath at Mitzpah, saying none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife, because they're such bad people. We'll go ahead and marry the Amorites, and the Amalekites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Philistines. We ain't going to let our kids marry a Benjamite. It makes no sense. The people came to the house of God, and they're like, uh-oh. They lifted up their voice, and they said, oh, Lord, what has happened? Now we're missing a tribe. We killed all of Benjamin. I didn't think about that. Now, it doesn't even sound good on a t-shirt, the 11 tribes of Israel, right? We need 12. So it was on the next morning that the people rose early and built an altar and offered burnt offerings. And just follow the twisted logic. Are you ready? Hey, who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up with us to the assembly of the Lord? Because they'd made another oath. The other oath was anyone who would not come up to the Lord at Mitzpah will be put to death. Literally, if you didn't respond to the cut up, hacked up concubine piece that showed up at your tribe, then we're coming after you. Woe to those who have no king and do what is right in their own eyes. We're watching it. We're watching it around us. You think it's crazy in Portland. It was a little crazier. The children of Israel grieved and said, oh no, one of our tribes is cut off. What are we going to do? What are we going to do for wives? There's only 600 of them and they live in a cave. And they said, well, what is the one who didn't come up to Mitzpah? And they took a survey, literally. Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? Hey, there's nobody from Jabesh Gilead. Where are you at, Jay? Jabesh Gilead. I saw it on one of these maps. Not this one. I'll let you look for it while I keep talking. So you notice it should be up north and to the right. Yeah, there we go. Jabesh Gilead. They hadn't come all the way down. Can you kind of go all the way down to Gibeah? They hadn't made this trek. They're like, those Benjamites, they're nasty. So is everybody else. We're staying home. So they didn't come. And in fact, no one had come from Jabesh Gilead. So the people are like, oh, that's fantastic. We'll do what's right. What shall we do? We'll go kill everybody from Jabesh Gilead. That'll fix it. So the congregation sent out 12,000 valiant men, commanded them, they strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the sword, kill them all, kill every woman, kill all the children. Oh, wait a second. I just had a genius idea. Capture all their young women, and we'll give them to the Benjamites, and we'll have a tribe. We won't have anybody from Jabesh Gilead, but we'll have a tribe. And this is the thing you shall do, utterly destroy every male and every woman who's known a man intimately. And they found among the inhabitants 400 young virgins. I see a math problem. There's 600 men in a cave, right? They hadn't known anybody. They were virgins. They brought them to the camp at Shiloh. What a wonderful day to be. Oh, it's my birthday. I'm 16, and I'm now being hauled off. Everybody in my family was butchered because that was right. And I'm being hauled off to the Lord because we're going to ask God how I can be abducted by the Danite or the Benjamites, who were these wicked, terrible people defending people who massacre women. Just, can you get it? Can you grasp it? It's bad. Then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin, hey, we found a wife. So Benjamin came back and they gave them the women. And yet there was 200 shy, right? So the wisdom of man. So the people are like, oh, we're missing 200. So the elders said, here's what we'll do. We can't let Benjamin disappear. We accidentally killed them all. However, we also made an oath. We can't give them our wives. All right, so what are we going to do? Our daughters for wives. Here, what are we going to do? No more towns to kill. Here it is. There is a yearly feast, verse 19, to the Lord. Yahweh, the Lord. I just want to vomit. In Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway, right? So they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, hey, go and hide around this feast to the Lord. Go to church, hang outside in the lobby. Okay, just hang outside in the lobby of church and watch. And just when the worship leaders, the high school crowd comes in, the youth group comes in. When the youth group comes in, as they go through the lobby, leap out and take yourself a woman. That'll be blessed. And watch, and just when the daughters of Shiloh come out and perform their dances, then come out, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, and run away to Benjamin. And then we'll have kept our promise to the Lord. Then it shall be, when their fathers or brothers complain to us, we'll say, well, what could we do? We accidentally killed all the Benjamites in our rage. And so we had to do something, and we couldn't give them our daughters, so what are we going to do? Oh my goodness. So we had to keep our promise. And the children of Benjamin did so. They took enough wives for their number from those who danced, whom they caught. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt their cities, and they dwelt in them. And the children of Israel departed from there at that time, and everyone went back to his tribe and his family and his inheritance, and it was all pretty good. Conclusion, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Oh my goodness. The end. Father, thank you for this book and for how it touches us in our heart, Lord, how corrupt we can be if we don't have moral truth, if we don't have the Word of God, if we don't obey the Word of God. We are capable of anything, and we will call it wisdom. Lord, I just think of what it says in Romans 1. Professing to be wise, they became fools. We've read nothing but fools tonight, Lord. I pray that you would help us to cling to exactly what you told Timothy. Take heed to your doctrine. Continue in them, for in doing so you will save both yourself and those who hear you. God, may our doctrine remain pure. May we not become corrupted by the society around us. And may we learn how bad it can be when men make their own decisions based on their own logic rather than the commandments of the Lord. Please, Lord, keep us. In Jesus' name, amen.